this chill stream today for Tuesday, the 4th of June. In 6 days, the CSM will open up on June 7th. Wait a minute. How come that math didn't work out? On Monday. It is June 7th, right? Yeah, June 7th.
June 10th, I thought, is when the actual voting starts.
Sorry. Okay.
7. Yeah.
Well, it's really weird the way that they laid it out. I believe that the end of the campaign period ends on the 7th.
Right.
And then the actual voting takes place from the 10th through the 17th. So, like, what is there, like some 3-day blackout period where, like, no more campaigning can take place?
Yeah, right. You have to stop talking.
What is the functional difference? That's what I want to know.
There is no fun. It's just...
Let's double check those numbers. Yeah, it's through the 7th, yeah. And then the 10th it begins. So, yeah, you can't talk about campaigning between the 7th and the 10th. So... that's why
you get boosted from the ballot if you violate these campaign rules.
Yeah. So to be clear, the voting starts, as I was saying, on the 10th. That's Monday, and that goes for 1 week until the 17th. So it's next Monday through Monday. That is all the voting time you will get.
Yeah, yes. Through downtime Monday. Let's not make the mistake that so many people out there did with the last giveaways thing, where they're like, well, it was supposed to go through the 20th or whatever, and it's like, yeah, the downtime on the 20th.
Yeah, that downtime is a real trick, right? It's actually throwing some people off.
Yeah. So downtime on Monday the 17th.
Let me make some adjustments here.
And then they announced the winners at EVE Toronto.
I'm flirting with going. I'm still. I am still flirting with going.
You should. I think it's gonna be a good time.
I like that city a lot, and I kind of got tacit permission to go. But wife wants a pound of flesh. She's like, there's a path for you going, but
there's a path.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, what I have to do. But yeah, I'm still thinking about it. I just don't know. I just have to make all these arrangements, and I have to find a room and everything else. And, it would take a while. Well, oh my gosh, you guys can't see it that are watching the stream, but we have like 10 people in here, and I've said this was going to be a little less private than normal, so I'm not allowing everybody to talk. It just gets unwieldy, so we're going to just allow a few people to talk, and then we'll change it as we go, as people come and go and that sort of thing. So hang tight if you're hanging out and lurking. But I certainly don't want to sit here and fight about CSM and all that kind of stuff. This is a chill stream, and I need to relax because I'm getting all stressed out just thinking about it.
Well, why is that?
Why am I getting stressed out?
Yeah.
Too many unknowns. Like there's too many unknowns. You can't really know. All right. Well, there's a first thing, right? Like if you're Killaby here, who is unmuted, so he can chime in if he wants. If you're at the top of a ticket, which he certainly is, and then that alliance trades votes with an allied alliance, so now you trade the top spots with each other, and that happens 3 or 4 times. The earliest position anyone can get in without having a block to support them is like 4th, 5th, 6th, or something like that. It's unless you're doing something that is very unusual. If you're an alliance that is very unusual, then you might put somebody else at the top. But normally the first 4 seats, the ones that really count, are all taken up by each other's blocks. And that's the way it has been for a few years now. But it's getting very, very tight now. I don't know why nullsec has such a hard-on for the CSM. Do you guys know?
I would say part of it is just sort of the competitive nature of, if there's something to be won, they're well organized to do it. So therefore, why wouldn't they, right?
Yeah, Exactly. It's almost like, look, this is just another place that we can exert power. And I think the Imperium has shown what a good organization can do. And I think the other groups are, they tried to put it together before, but it was a little more cooperative. It wasn't so dictatorial or whatever. And I think now it's becoming more like, okay, we realize it's a necessity, so we've got to do this, and that's happening. I think you're seeing an interesting mix in that Sword Dragons coalition, or Sword Dragons, coalition of what is it? Guardians of the Dead Galaxy? Is that the new way of saying it? They've kind of mixed in with. I think they might mix in with Imperium this year because there is such tension between the North and Guardians of the Galaxy or Dead Coalition.
Just to go back to your kind of vote trading, sort of politics that are going on out there between various groups, right? I've always questioned that. I've always questioned what the actual ability for that to help is, because while within a particular, let's say, alliance ballot, right? Those first one or couple of names, or when you're talking about something like, the Goons Imperium, more broadly, maybe 4 names, are people that their people know and are probably willing to vote for, just on it coming down. Everybody else that comes after that, I really think that even within these supposed coalition ballots out there, is a test member going to, I don't know, vote more for this number 5 guy or 6 guy or whatever that happened to be something between leaderships, trying to jockey? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if a goon does that necessarily all the way down, for somebody that they may not think is somebody that they'd want to vote for, and it was just a trade with some other group out there.
That's what surprised me about not just Killaby, but other leaders that I've talked to that are number 1 on their ticket. I've asked them, I was like, dude, you're a sure thing, right? I mean, your guys are going to vote for you. You're charismatic and your guys like you, et cetera, et cetera. And none of them, not any of them, except maybe Aerith, but I didn't talk to him about this. This is just a known, is sitting back saying, yeah, of course I'm going to get in. It's everybody's nervous. It's not a sure thing because nobody knows which way the people actually vote. And even if you feel, even if you're at the top and you're the main guy at the alliance, it may not be enough. All your guys voting for you at number 1 may still not be enough because I think what was Horde's vote last year? It was like 1,000 or so, and so is that enough? If that's all you have, so you have to cover your bets, and I think that's what the urgency is.
Well, I mean, it's certainly a chunk, and it's certainly a chunk and additive to something out there. If all of those people vote in line, and that's really just my question of whether or not they vote in line past kind of those names that they are either within their own alliance or tightly affiliated with. So when you look at something like Greater PanFam or something like that, right? Where they are close to those individuals, even though they're not necessarily in the same alliance. But once you get down into your name is on the ballot at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
I don't know how effective that is anywhere.
So I've got 2 questions.
Yeah.
I've got a point about that and another question. One is that you got to remember it's not just about getting in on like a high number. It's about surviving the elimination rounds, because as that happens, then more votes will be distributed to the smaller number of pool, right? So having a high number of number 1, number 2 votes is incredibly important to just even surviving the first couple of rounds. But my question I have is that was brought up in Talking in Stations, that Goons has a link that not only provides the correct ballot, but verifies that the ballot was done correctly. Is that actually true? Because that does not sound like a good thing.
I've never heard of that. I think what they've had in the past is that, or at least this is, I heard it from Elise on one of the shows. He was saying that the high-sec guy provided people in trade hubs with a link that said, here's how you can vote. And if you want to, here's how you can vote for me. And it was a link that put him at the top and then let you fill out the rest. And then I thought, is that
Right.
true that you can give somebody a link that puts your name at the top? Because if that's true, then
Yes.
then they give
Sorry.
that to their alliance, and it makes it a lot easier for them to vote the ballot. So essentially, you're giving people an autopilot for voting.
Right. Yeah, and
I can
knew
answer that
that.
question. I can answer that question. Sorry if I can
Sure.
break in.
Apple Pear.
Yeah. What Imperium does, it provides a link. That's something that CCP does. It gives you that link, provides you a link with the ballot, and you can click on it, log in with your accounts, and etc. They don't have a way to verify if you follow that link. What they have is they have on the forums a pop-up arrives when you log in, and you get asked with how many accounts you have voted and if you have voted the ballot. So what they do is like basically doing a poll on their own site to get, okay, that person voted with so many accounts, that person voted with so many accounts. So they have a good indication how many people have voted, where it is, and where they stand. So they don't can check if you voted the right way. That's not possible at any way, shape, or form. They only provide you a link. CCP gives you the ability to do that, so we make use of that. Provide you a link, you can click, you log in your accounts, and vote, and ask you to just give how many accounts you voted with.
So it's an exit poll type of thing. It sounds like so it's voluntary.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah.
But on the TIS, somebody said something that sounded to me like they had a way of knowing whether or not you voted. So I'm glad it's just an exit poll.
Dirk's going to get most of the airtime here. So
no. At first, you can vote the ballot by clicking the link and doing it. The only way that they can know how you voted, though, is if you tell them, "Yes, I voted the ballot," and I voted it the way you told me to, or whatever.
And in the end, you can check, of course, because CCP provides all ballots that are voted for in the way they have voted for it. So after the election is done and when all the stats are out, they can just check how many people voted the ballot GSF provided and how many people didn't, etc. So they can afterwards get a good indication if we give a ballot, how many people follow the exact.
And I think that Noisy actually did an analysis of that last year, where it showed something like 4,000 plus voted the straight Imperium line.
Yeah, Killaby, you're in here. You were saying you're not sure your people will vote for you.
Well, I mean, I can't be sure, right? I can't track. I can't force them to vote for me. I think most of them will.
Mm-hmm.
There might be people that just don't. But the main issue in the north is that, in PanFam anyways, that we've not really cared about the CSM for too long. So a lot of the people within the PanFam have adopted this sort of I don't care about the CSM attitude. Mm-hmm. So last year, for example, the problem was that, well, last year I got in, but most of my votes came from Horde and GOTG at the time. And that was mostly because a lot of people within NC, for example, they come at me were like, "Oh shit, I just wanted to vote for you, but the voting is already closed." They basically just missed the 1 week window. This year, we're going to make sure that can happen by just pinging it a lot and making sure people see it and vote, or try, or at least tell them, "Hey, the voting is open. Please go vote." And then we'll see what happens. But again, I'm not, and it's kind of a shame. Adama said in public chat, he said "Oh, it's a shame these guys aren't campaigning. It's kind of boring." And I agree, because you have all these no-name people, and I mean no-name without offending. I just mean it because they don't have a high profile in EVE. And you have all these people running, and they're putting so much effort into their campaign and putting out YouTube videos. They're going on every interview, every podcast they could possibly find to get some airtime, and at the end of the day, it's not going to help them. And it's just just the way the system works, basically, and obviously I'm going to abuse it, because I would be stupid if I would not, but it's not a very nice system for something like this to work out, because like I said, basically 8 slots are already tied up, so we have 2 wildcard slots that could potentially go to some quote-unquote no-name people, and the rest of the slots are basically already filled anyways. And if I see 40 candidates, however many it was, that's just a shame for all the effort that these guys put in when they have no real chance of getting in the first place.
Well, I mean,
yeah, but that's historically been, this, and less so today. I mean, my God, there were, it wasn't that long ago when we had 70, 80 people, running for the CS.
Yeah, I don't know if, I think Zenuria is saying there's too many people. They're confusing everybody else on who to vote for, and I just don't know if there are that many available ballots. I think the bigger problem is people just not logging in to vote, or if they do, they'll pick the few names that they know of at the top, and then
That's the best part, yeah.
be done with
Best
it.
part is like there's like a lot of people that always complain after the CSM results get published. And it's like, oh, there's 6 goon candidates on the CSM. Blah, blah, I'm so mad. This is so shit. But then you ask them, hey, did you bother to vote? And they're like, nah, because why even bother, And it's like, bro, you know how like politics work at all?
It's just like the self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
It's like in Germany where like all the people that don't go vote in Germany effectively help all the right-wing parties to get more and more percentages because there's less votes in total. I was like, if you don't vote, you're effectively voting some right-wing party in Germany. Whereas if you go vote, it doesn't matter who you go vote for. At the end of the day, it's still good. And those people just don't get it. But usually those people that don't bother to vote because they're too cool to do it or whatever are complaining the loudest. It's just the way it works.
This is why I'm especially suspicious of big block members going on and on about how much everything's locked in and how voting is worthless and all that sort of stuff, because it really seems like they're trying to suppress the non-block vote.
Well, we're not trying to suppress it. We're just like, that's just the way the system is, right? If all I have to do, so okay, let me take an example. So let's say every character in NC votes for me, right? That's like 4,000 characters or something. And then I go and talk to goblins, and I tell goblins, hey, how about I put you on the number 2 of my ballot and you put me on number 2 of your ballot? That little conversation is going to give me more votes that any quote unquote, and again, no offense, no name, would ever get by going on podcasts. Like, I would just get so many votes from Horde right there that why would I bother going on 20 podcasts and putting up a fat post on the forums when I can just have a 10-minute conversation with goblins and get more votes than they could ever get? And that's just the way the system works and the way that, large alliances work.
Yeah, I mean, Astaroth, the answer to your question, do I think that it's intentionally trying to talk down the overall vote? I don't think it's intentionally trying to do that. I think it is stating some of the blatantly obvious when we're talking about, what is basically party politics here. But there is somewhat of an element to it, because when you look at something like the STV, right, you got to meet the quota to get on. Well, the fewer overall votes that are cast ends up, reducing that quota down even further. So if you eliminate all of those people out there that are, let's call them independent type voters or whatever, and only leave it to the block, well, the blocks are the only ones that are going to get on at an even cheaper rate.
Steve is a very good example of somebody who's not part of a block but gets in pretty consistently. I think at the moment Steve is the longest, sort of a member that's been long. I think he broke the record of somebody this year. So he's now the longest member of the CSM, and he has no affiliation whatsoever.
Well,
but there's like this.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Steve has been there a long time, and he doesn't have a block to support him and those sorts of things. But I do think he has some advantages because, and this is not in a jealous way, I think he's remarkable. But the thing is, he does make stuff available to players that use technology to gain advantage, right? Third-party stuff. Like, I believe he does some stuff. Obviously, he puts his site out, Fuzzworks, which helps a lot of people in industrials and all that. And he probably gets some goodwill from there. But doesn't he also put out stuff that allows players to interpret EVE data for their own services? And in that sense, he might get some support.
He provides an API endpoint. That being said, I'm actually shocked at the number of people that have asked me, because I have the big banner that says vote for, Steve Ronikin and Matterall. And people ask me, well, who's Steve? Why should I vote for him? And then when I say, oh yeah, he's Fuzzy Steve, they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that. Like, I'm starting to become concerned at the number of people that don't realize that those tools are provided by that person anymore.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that it's not just the player at large. Like, I think organizations use his tools in order to better utilize it for their services, which would, I think, make some goodwill among alliances as well. I don't know if that translates. I do know he would probably this year be on the Imperium ballot because they're afraid that there's too many people that could take votes out of his candidacy.
I'll probably be on the Imperium ballot, but it'll be so far down the list it doesn't really matter, right? Every spot past, like, if you go and put somebody on number 8 or 9 of your ballot, it's basically more like sending a signal and being like, this guy's a corporate, CSM, we'd like to work with him, so we're putting him on our ballot, even though he's part of the other side of Eve. Because if you look at the data from the last elections, basically I think it was like everything past the 4th spot in most cases just doesn't do anything, basically.
That's interesting, though, that the later spots are really just message sending, like diplomatically.
And it matters, but it's irrelevant for the vote itself.
Yeah, issue of goodwill. Well, so anything past, like, what would you say, 4? So
I think 4, yeah. I think it's 4 for Imperium, and for most other alliances it's 3.
So most of those top 4 spots, though, are all replicas of one another, right? Like, you might be number 1 on NC dot, you'll be number 2 in PL if they put out a ballot, which they might this year, or you'll be number 2 for Horde. And so that really kind of ensures that you're going to get at least some, a giant chunk of all that.
Yeah, a good chunk if they bothered to vote, yeah.
Yeah. And then you have the same thing going on in the South with the Imperium and Legacy coalition trading votes in that same way. And then there are these wild cards that are Initiative has been independent, so we don't know what they're going to do. But we look over at Fraternity to see where they're aligning, and because they have a bunch of players. And then there's this new group, the Man Go Army, that has apparently 500 Chinese players that everybody's courting at this time, including myself. But everybody's like, hey, can you get me on? Can you get me on at a high point or something like that? It's very interesting to see because I think they are in a very specific spot in that the guy who leads them is communicating.
Aren't they test renters?
Right now, they're not renters. Well, yeah, I guess you could call them. They're living in test sanctioned space, Detroit, building up. And what you're seeing, though, is that his guys are more or less new to the server all at once. That's 500 guys, if that's the number, all new to the server, and he essentially holds the key to them. So that's much different than 500 guys in NC dot that all have their own mind, have their own corp histories, and they have their own like loyalties that they've had in the past. That's much more of a solid voting block if he activates it. It's kind of interesting.
FRT is running Arrow of Speed or something, what he's called. He's one of their guys, by the way, because you were asking.
Yeah, they're running a guy. I didn't know that.
Pretty sure, yeah. Elo got declined, obviously, for unknown reasons still. But they're in contact with CCP, although I'm not sure how good the chances are for an overturning this late when the vote's about to open. So that's probably not going to happen. So then the Arrow of Speed or something, what he's called, is going to be their number 1. And then I'm pretty sure Gobbins is on the FRT ballot as well, and maybe me. Who knows?
Yeah, that might be. Wouldn't surprise me. It's going to be very interesting to see the balloting this year because I think it's going to reveal a few things. There won't be many surprises, but it will be interesting to see exactly what the order is because the order is very important. So I think that'll be interesting. The
Omega's there too.
Omega, yeah.
So that's what I want to say. Like, you're basically saying, or the way it basically works is you have to do something to stick out of the masses, right? To be voted for if you don't have any block voting for you, right? And Bris did it last year with his great campaigning video, and then Omega, sorry, I just can't pronounce that name.
Mm-hmm.
He did a really good video this year, and he got a lot of attention through that. So he's going to get a lot of votes through that video, and also a lot of people that I know are putting him on their ballot on the number 4. So there's there's that as well. I think he has some. He's one of those wild cards. I think have a higher chance of getting in, personally.
Yeah. He's got
And then
some.
there's always the maximum meme candidates, like Zenuria, for example. And sorry, Zenuria, but that's just the way it is, man.
I-
Like if there's an alliance that just wants to go all out meme on their CSM vote, they just vote for Zenuria. And that can actually get somebody voted as well. I mean, look what happened with Trump, right? Like Trump was basically a giant meme and then he was president. And that's basically what Zenuria is, man. He's the Trump of Eve. So it's like,
Jeez.
I
Oh
feel
my
like
god!
Wow.
I feel like, that's a possibility as well.
Well, I think he's running. To be fair, I think he's running as a serious candidate. But I think his first year, I think you could say that he was definitely helped
Oh, I
by.
know he is.
Yeah.
I know he's running as a serious candidate. I'm just saying, like, for a
Yeah.
lot of people, he's still like in their heads, he's still the meme guy. So
Mhm.
And,
that's what I've heard, anyways.
But
It is worth
and it,
noting that everything I've heard from Zenoria's time on the CSM was that he actually took it very seriously.
yeah, but he had a low bar, I have to say. I'm not trying to douse his chances here. I think if you're interested in Zanuria, definitely look into what he says and then decide for yourself. But the bar was low. It's kind of like everybody expected him to wreck the place, and because he didn't throw chairs, all of a sudden he was a good CSM. And I just thought that was not fair. Like, what standard really are we using to rate him? And this is something I'm on the record for saying way back then, so it's not new. But what I'm interested in this year is I think the real wild card is Olmeca, especially because he seems to have the Reddit buzz, and he made a video about him basically sniping stuff away from Delve, and I think that was interesting. He's become a symbol for northern voters. Even people in my corporation are like, "Oh, Mecca, that guy's got my vote," and it's because he's able to affect Delve, and the North really isn't able to stop this invasion that's happening from the people from Delve. So I think there's kind of an interesting emotional play there, and I think voting is very emotional. It's not very rational.
The only
and one
reason
thing
he's
I
hunting, he's
sorry.
hunting Delve because Delve are the best hunting grounds, right? There's
Yeah.
just the most crabs there, right? He would be hunting somewhere else if he could, but like, he explained that very well in his video. That's just the way that the crab, and what did he say? The crabbening? He said something. The crabification,
Yeah.
right? The crabification of Eve, where everybody's drawn towards a big block to have some safe crab space. Goons just absorbed a lot of people during that phase, and that's just the best hunting grounds there's at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, not at the moment, but usually.
One thing I hear people talking about those new Chinese coming in and horde votes and all kind of votes, but people must not forget that you can only vote if you have an Omega account. So how many people of those, the 500, have their account Omega, so they will be able to vote? I think that's also a good question people must ask. Like, you can be on their ballot, but if they have like half the people or even a quarter of the people only Omega, then yeah, being on the ballot is nice, but how many votes will you get from that?
Mm-hmm. So we shall see. I think it's interesting. I think he plays an interesting kind of role. I think I do too, to be fair. There's a spoiler aspect to me as well. Like, do I spoil? I may not get in, but do I spoil other people's chances? I don't know who I'm a direct contrast with, though. But it's the same. We're talking about the audience and the emotional appeal and that sort of thing. I'm not trying to be a part of a faction necessarily, because that's just not how I enjoy the game. I'm looking at this as a representation of players to the company about the game. So it's not the whole faction thing confuses me about everybody putting their candidate up when their candidate is really a reward position for their service. It's also, I mean, you can't complain too much because they do put very qualified people up there, people who know this game inside and out at multiple levels. But that's kind of where we've gone with this, instead of really a big
I would
soup of different people that play different game styles.
I would love to see some LoSec candidates, some wormhole candidate to get on and be on the CSM myself as well, just so I have somebody to work with. Because whenever we have doing the CSM summit, right, we have these sessions coming up, these wormhole sessions, these LoSec sessions. We got with Sutonia, right, who has a decent clue about LoSec. There's probably some people within the FW community that would disagree, but and then we have zero wormhole. Like, so whenever we talk about wormholes, literally zero people of the people that are there can actually give legitimate feedback firsthand. We've got like we've had Bris sort of try to bundle some of the feedback of the wormhole community together and then relay it to CCP. But whenever CCP asks him follow-up questions, right, follow-up questions about specific issues, how would he know? He doesn't know the problems firsthand. He just gets told, hey, this is broken, please tell to CCP. And then CCP asks what specifically about it is broken. And all you can say is, I don't know, right? Like, that's why, like whenever, and it sounds really bad, but whenever there's like a discussion coming up about wormholes, it's like, why aren't you guys talking about faction warfare? Or why aren't you guys talking about wormholes mostly? Because I don't have a clue about it. Why would I talk about wormholes? I have no idea how that shit works. I have no idea how faction warfare works. So whenever we talk about it, I just shut up. Right? I listen, but I shut up. And if there's any point I feel like I could feedback on, I will, but most of the part I can't because I just don't know the mechanics. I've never played in wormholes really. I tried to set up a crab operation and died like one side in, got ganked by HK, and I never really did faction warfare. So it's I would like to see a wormhole in the low sec candidate and be on a CSM myself, just so I can learn something about the other parts of the game.
Yeah, I'm putting Dirk in charge of today's chill stream. He said the fucking, he said the funniest thing this morning. What was it? Oh, I was expressing how this is kind of stressful and all this, and he's like, "Do you need a good cry? Do you need to have some white Zinfandel from a box?" Or...
I said, "Are you chill streaming today, or do you want to do a live one-on-one Barbara Walters where you cry?" I'm like, you can get a box of white Zin out and work yourself into it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's hilarious. But actually, the honest truth is, one of the things I really liked listening to when I was listening to a bunch of podcasts, I still do, but they're just less these days, was Dirk talking with, it's not Giggles, it's Wiggles. Yes, I always think Giggles. Just talking about the patch notes that were coming out. And I used to love that. It was so good. Somewhat funny and very informative, and, it
was just chill.
Yeah. Exactly.
But look, one of the things I am going to say here, because you host these chill streams a couple times a week and whatnot, and we've been through now ostensibly 3 to 4 weeks of kind of campaigning and things like that. You've never really used this platform that you built, that you're known for, for kind of getting some more of your voice out there. When you host these chill streams, you're still kind of in that moderator mode, quite a bit.
Yeah. That's because I think other people are interesting, and that's what. Thanks, Ashtrathi. Other people are interesting, and I'm trying to, like I said, I approach the game like I'm a student of the game. I'm looking at it. I'm looking for patterns, and I'm looking for how people are motivated, and so the interest in the situation, not necessarily the interest in the people. Like, I like Killaby just fine, but the position he's in and his voice is more interesting to me than where I'm sitting, because I'm like a spectator. And so what I try to do with the shows in general is to channel the desire to know more. And that's what I try to give the audience. So yeah, it's kind of inappropriate for me to, at least on the proper shows, to talk about my perspective or to show people how charming I am, because it's not about me. I'm a channel for the people who want to know more about advanced gameplay. And it's how I always approach it. So that's the habit. So you saw when I got interviewed, I would talk, and I just couldn't stop talking, because all of that conditioning of like, never let a moment drop, right? No dead air, was affecting the way I even interview these days. So it wasn't a relaxed interview. It was very much like, let me give you as much information as I can about me, because I'm bottled up all the time.
Well, and to be honest, after listening to the interviews, it was kind of like, I thought you had almost lost your ability to sort of to speak what's on your own mind, because some of the answers you gave, in there, kind of conflicted with other things I've heard you say in longer conversations, right? So maybe it's just that you weren't used to being interviewed as opposed to being the interviewer in a way.
Yeah, and what's funny is I thought, like, I never thought I would run for CSM, but I thought, like, well, I'll be interviewed by anyone who will talk to me, and I'll just tell them what I think, and it'll be that simple and stuff. But I think you can't be that now in retrospect, I look back on it and you can't be that undisciplined. People don't have the attention span that's that long. What I'm good at is sitting and talking with people individually or in a small group. You know, it's what we do at Talking in Stations. It's what you and I have done for years, and talk about the game and how it works and how it is working and how it's not working. And we do that over a long period of time. It's a very slow burn. And so to try to cram all that into an interview, I realized you can't do that. Now I realize you can't do that. You need to have concise points, hit those points, and hope that people want to know more. But
so what you're saying is you're the Larry King of Eve.
Yeah, sort of. No, I don't know if that's what I'm saying. It's more. No, I'm just saying I can't take what I do and condense it into a 15-minute interview or a 30-minute interview. That's why you saw those go kind of long. There's too much to talk about. There's too much information up here in my brain to put it all down. So then what I try to do is put down the interesting things. And so I think that's why you saw some answers that were like, well, that doesn't seem straightforward. It seems very maybe contradictory. It's because I'm not giving you the typical answer that you're going to hear from everybody else. I'm giving you the second answer to that, like the afterthought to that. So when you ask me about a thing, I won't just say like, here's the proper answer for the thing to get elected. Instead, I go right to but there's this other interesting thing that you need to think about as well. And that's what that was about.
The problem with, I think, answers like that is that they tend to be very 80,000 feet when so much of what people are thinking related to the CSM is much closer to freaking, nap of the earth, so, yeah. You're talking in sort of these high level, if I had a visionary conversation with CCP, this is kind of my line of thinking, as opposed to, something that is much more, down the line, right? Like, there are times when I sit there and I talk about the overall ecology in Eve and how I think that we need, comprehensive reform of, a lot of these things, right? But I know that conversation with CCP is probably going to be so rare compared to a bucket 10 drawers down, that is more narrowly focused.
But that's not what I'm doing is not necessarily, because my strategy was, I'm not going to do what we know won't work for CCP, which is to tell you all the agenda points I want to hit, right? We all know that when you go in to meet with CCP, they have an agenda and you respond to it, right? You're the bouncing board to it. And so what I was trying to demonstrate was, this is how I think, this is what I believe, and these are the reflection that CCP will see when they talk to me. Instead of saying like, yeah, I want, I'll just take some examples here from chat. I want to allow caps in high sec, like that's, you can go in there with that and say, this is what I'd like to see. And I honestly think that that's like, yeah, thank you for your opinion. And then they go on because they have an agenda, they have a path. It's a business with a strategy and everything else. Where I thought the CSM has been not very useful, or at least what we've seen of the CSM is not very useful, is the strategy stuff for the development path. Like you see really good, really knowledgeable information in the nuts and bolts stuff that they ask, like, how we're going to rebalance ships and stuff like that. That stuff looks pretty good. But when it gets to the strategy and all that other stuff, there seems to be a lot of imagination missing. It's, I don't know.
I could be very wrong, about this, because it is strictly based on multiple years as an outsider kind of hearing what CSM have to say. They very rarely talk about being at the forefront of long-term vision. I mean, I think that is still something that CCP drives itself, and their implementation of that is where the CSM come in again on those small, more narrow kind of buckets, right? Mm-hmm. Killaby could probably give a better, thing of that. But, again, based on my understanding of it, I don't know that long-term vision of where the game is headed out into the future, that you need to be able to build all of these things underneath, is really what the CSM is involved with all that often. And I don't just mean roadmap. I don't just mean they show them a roadmap with some vague shit. I mean, I'm talking like legit vision of how CCP views this overall world.
Yeah, most of the time we get in on in a later stage of the development process.
Right. So, and it's not just like, hey, here's the direction you should go in, and Matterall is a voice for that sort of thing. It's not just that, but if you look at all the balance changes and all the changes in general, what like frame of mind are you coming to it from? And all the guys that are in the CSM, I think most of them are PvPers, right? So then you have 9 out of 10 people that are PvPers, probably first. That's the first thing they are. And then most of those are PvPers in the lawless lands where everything goes.
There's actually not that many PvPers. You have Estonia, who was a PvPer, me, Sword to some extent, and then maybe Jintan. Aerith isn't a PvPer, Judge isn't a PvPer, Steve isn't a PvPer, Merc isn't he does PvP, but he's mostly focused on new player experience because that's his corp. And Innominate is a tech guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's pretty balanced.
Well, you mean actually getting in your ship and PvPing, but that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. It's more player versus player. Like that's the angle they're coming at the game from. It's a competitive arena. Whether you're actually piloting or making, I would say the Judge has, cares about his team winning. That's why he was a diplomat, and that's why he was, he was pivotal in the, what do we call it now? The Casino War B? Is that what it was, Dirk?
What was that?
What do we call World War B? Casino War now?
What, Casino War B?
Casino War B? Yeah. He's so, but they're coming at it from a place of conflict. I mean, heck, he was an advisor to CO2, which was in every conflict since the beginning of the modern era. But that's what
I want to ask you a question, because this has come up twice today, and I need to get a clarification on this. I think it should have in some ways maybe been followed up on a little bit better. Cheetah actually asks it out here, but it came up from, I believe it was the Pearman Apple Pear earlier, about one of the initial questions that were part of that interview. Okay, that I believe went something along the lines of, CCP has asked the CSM to bring to us, let's say their top 3 issues that they believe need to be addressed in the near term future. Okay, is that something that you agree with? And I believe that your answer was something like, no, I don't agree with that. So I'm going to ask it again here. Do you understand what the reason was for CCP saying, look, you guys, do you communally have 3 reasons or 3 topics that we should be focused on, or do you not agree with that idea of even if there is commonality, that it shouldn't be presented as commonality?
Well, what were there 3, there's actually 4 positions, right? And one of them was, we want to make sure that EVE devs are playing the game. We want to make sure that war decks get dealt with. I don't know, but there was definitely like a pre-meeting from CSM only to get their heads around 4 points, I think, that they wanted to put in front of CCP. CCP may have invited that. I don't know if that's the case, but that's probably true. But yeah, to sit down.
No, they don't.
They don't invite that. So you guys made that up on your own?
We do that because the experience in the CSM, and that's not from me because obviously I was only here for 1 term so far, but the more senior CSM, if we just all walk in there and we all have our different agendas, then it doesn't work. Like there's only so much time we have with the devs, and we want to focus on some key issues, and then we can work on some other stuff on the side. But that's why we usually sit together for the 2 summits I was there. We did it. We sat down the evening before the first summit sessions, so basically on Sunday evening or Saturday evening, and we sort of iron out 3 or 4 points that we want to focus on primarily. But then obviously we advise CCP or whatever other issues they come up with, or they notice, and whenever they have any questions, we answer them and so on. But yeah, so, we didn't get asked by CCP to prep 4 points that are the biggest issue or whatever.
No, that's part of a strategy the CSM came up with, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
because it's more effective. Like if we start arguing about, if say, like go with the narrative and be like, Killaby walks into a CSM summit session about structures, and I'm like, this is OP. Goons have 40 keep stars in Delft. They're never going to be invaded. And then goons are like, oh no, you're wrong. And then we have a discussion among ourselves about a problem. Basically, the whole sessions is down the drain. It's very important as the CSM acts as one unit whenever we approach CCP with a problem, so we can actually get stuff done from the past experience.
Yeah. Because it doesn't require that they have a common, let's say, a common agenda. But if you can get most, if not all, of the people on that CSM to recognize that there are some key areas out there, like I think like in this last term, right? Wardex. The broken nature of Wardex and what that meant for not nullsec.
Yeah, it was on there because it was just something that came up over the years, over and over and over again. And also, like, we basically recognized as a CSM that Wardex are a problem, so we did put it at the top of our priority, even though we're not. Basically, none of us are really involved in HiSec except Steve, because we do actually hear people. I know that wormholders are pretty unhappy. I do know that faction warfares are pretty unhappy. The problem is if I go to CCP and say, hey, you guys need to fix faction warfare, they ask me why, what's broken. I'm like, I don't know, because I don't play it, right? But we hear that it is a problem. We hear that there's issues. What we need is somebody to give the exact details on what the issues are to CCP, right?
That's why I said earlier that I see that there's a real problem with your candidacy, that you said I don't really want to work with others to get towards some common things together and work towards that and get there. So we have a united front as CSM and get CCP behind the real big problems in the game that need to focus on, because they only have that much bandwidth.
I don't know.
And that's at least what
did it work?
That's at least what.
Did it work?
Yes, we have Citadels 2.0 because the CSM said that Citadels are more important than other things to finish, and that it was broken and that needed to update. We have the Vortex system because of that reason, and there are many other probably less things that they really said we want to focus on these things that needs to be worked on, and they are listening to that. It's working better than everybody giving their own ID all over the place and like, oh no, yeah, we just do our own thing, because there's not one thing the whole player base thinks that's really important, and that's like what that.
Well, Killaby said something that was interesting. He said the senior CSM. Who are the senior CSM?
Sword, Steve, Aerith, Inam, probably. I don't know how many years he's been on, but yeah.
Right.
And people that have been on a CSM for more than 2 years.
Right. Guys have been there a while. Mm-hmm. They said this is the best way. This is how it works. Now, my question is like the agenda. How is it? Do first year guys get to put their ideas on the agenda on the four things?
Why not? If they
I don't know.
Basically everybody in the CSM, in the current CSM, acknowledges what my expertise is, and when I'm one of those guys. So there's people like Sword, and it's not a bad thing necessarily, but Sword, he talks a lot during pretty much every session. Sword has a lot of airtime, and I talk a lot less. But whenever I do talk, I feel like it has more weight because I talk less, right? I just keep my mouth shut at the topic that I don't know stuff about pretty much 100%. Everything that I'm not 100% comfortable deeply discussing, I'm not gonna say too much about, because I don't want to have 2 or 3 follow-up questions come from devs and then be like, oh, I have no idea. So I only talk when I'm on a topic that I know 100% what I'm talking about, and I do that. And then every single bit of feedback that I've given so far, I feel like was heard to some degree.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not necessarily the way I wanted it to be heard, but that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, less words, a little more weight. I understand. But Dirk, if your question was like, do I not want to work with a group? Essentially, that's not true. I work with groups every day in my workplace, and I was on design teams that were 3 to 6 people big, doing movie posters for X-Men and stuff like that. These are big movies with big responsibilities and tight groups where everybody's talented and everybody has to work under pressure, under amazing pressure, where there's a ton of money at stake, basically. So working as a group and, getting consensus is not something I'm opposed to. What I'm opposed to is like, where's that agenda driven and how is it driven? And if everybody's thinking about large scale PvP, then, I question like the voices and the weight of voices inside that group. But if everybody's treated equal and the agenda is not something that's pushed by 2 or 3 people, maybe, from the same sector, then that seems like a pretty good process. What I was saying was it would be unfortunate if you all new CSM came into a group, the group was dominated by senior guys that said, this is our agenda, do you guys buy it? And because the new guys were like, yeah, okay, we just are happy to be here, then the agenda is formed by guys who kind of own CSM. That to me is a little riskier than and I'm expressing like, well, you need to be able to express, some of the greater concerns of the game can't be just about epic PvP. Small gang is pretty cool too. Wormhole is pretty cool too. Faction War needs some love. There's a lot of different places to fight in ships that need more attention as well, and they need to be protected or at least looked at as how these things affect them that are made for nullsec and that sort of stuff. But even all that PvP in ships, the pew 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 stuff, is not what this game is all about. There needs to be voices for stuff that is not about the active fighting all the time. I know I hear it all the time. Our shows, if you look at the last show, are almost 80% PvP. These are all the heroes that you guys look up to and follow, and that's what we put on, when we do our presentations. But I recognize that you can't eat meat all the time. You need to have downtime.
Blasphemer.
You need to have other things. Coming from like a vegetarian, that's probably not a winner, right? You need to have...
Don't tell people you're a vegetarian. Jesus, totally. You just lost 6 more votes.
I know. Yeah, I know. But you need to have this place appeal to a wider audience than just the people who are in here. And I think you do that with multiple hooks. You do that with, different things. You do that with imaginative story. So anyway, all the stuff that is important to you guys that are going to be doing the voting is going to be represented, except maybe this other stuff that I'm trying to help represent, all the other parts of EVE Online, because it kind of feels like the game has gotten a little bit predictable. I think Hilmar was right on the money. And, how did we get into this box? It used to feel wide open with a lot of groups. And now it feels like if you're not part of 4 groups, then, you're not really registering. And that does not seem right.
Well, I mean, look, I think that there's a reason why shows tend to talk about the conflict drivers of EVE Online, okay, whether they be direct ship-to-ship combat or some other form of conflict driver out there, and because that is where the human player storyline is, okay, that really gets people talking. Okay, it's not to say that things like the economics of EVE don't get talked about, or industrial type stuff in EVE doesn't get talked about. It just doesn't get talked about as much because the stories related to them are kind of more limited.
I also think that things like the word exchanges are going to slowly shift that over time. The issue is that if you were a PvEer or an industrialist, your best bet was to lay low, to attract as little attention as possible. But with things like the word exchanges, I hope that would change.
Yeah, well, you're right. I think that the stories, and maybe that's partly our fault, right? Because we're celebrating all the stuff that's easy to celebrate, like, timers and keep stars dying and territory being taken. And maybe we're not celebrating the way we should some of the market schemes. We did have, articles on some financial capers. We try to bring Aerith on to talk about, the more interesting aspects of high finance and how market shares were going to be taken and stuff. But there's not, that's something that we can do with or without the CSM, right? We can do that. We can try to bring surface stories that are smaller. Like right now you have Providence being attacked by Spectre Fleet. Again, that's PvP, but it's not the usual characters. But there's even more interesting stuff below the surface that it's hard to surface because you want to please the audience. You want the most amount of audience you can get so that most people benefit from it. But I think we could definitely do a better job as a media, and not just me, but everybody, trying to surface stories that are just interesting, because there's some interesting stuff in the game that's not necessarily combat and big money fights. But here's the thing. The CSM, and the reason I'm running is because I think you need that voice in the room too, saying like, let's look at some active gameplay for industrialists. Because right now, industrialists or PI or any of the stuff that takes, you can play as a casual player is just a passive income. And the best you're going to get out of it is income. And all you can do is really just save money in industrialization, right? It's only now that you're seeing, well, Planetary Interaction also had active gameplay. If you are there tending the garden actively, you can make more money faster, which I thought was pretty good. It's along the right lines. But this, the mutation of stuff coming out of abyssal space where you take a normal item and you mutate it is kind of an interesting crafting scenario where you're making a one-of-a-kind thing. And that, to me, has great appeal because it's not about saving money. It's about creating something of value. So you're starting to make value, not just save your money. And that to me is along the same lines. That's the kind of stuff I think is good. And I'm glad that CCP is really running with that. Now, here's the thing. I think when CCP comes out with that sort of stuff, I wonder how the CSM accepts it. Are they like, you're wasting your time. You need to balance out, Sino jammers. That's what I worry about. Also, I think there's some stuff that could be like, I think the war deck mechanics, I think that fix really lit up my imagination because I looked at it and I thought, oh, okay, so they're going to do what players have been asking for. They're going to balance it out so that if you're a defender and you get war decked, now you have the option of fighting back by taking out one of their structures and ending the war. And what that says to me is like, well, it's still essentially the same thing. It's a bribe to officials to look the other way while you attack somebody. And I guess, it can be written into the lore to make sense, but that just doesn't make much sense to me. And I feel like the fix for the war decks, although it was necessary and people needed to do it and they needed to do it fast, and I can appreciate all that, is essentially a balance pass. We'll see if the mechanics actually change the behavior they were trying to change and the retention of new players goes up. We'll see if that works. I'm a little skeptical. And I also think it could have been more interesting than that. Like you could have had, and I play with these ideas. These are not suggestions for them to develop, but these are just the kinds of things that I'm thinking about Eve needs to reflect more of. And that is stuff like hostile takeovers that are even financial. Why can't one corporation buy out another in a financial way? Or aren't there any kind of mechanics in that regard? Why can't mounting pressure pull you into a war rather than you just say, I'm paying my 100 million and I will have a war with these people? Like there should be a more dynamic ecosystem to war, because corporations going to war is a very strong imaginative peg that you can sell outside of the game. You can go to magazines and talk about, yes, this war deck mechanic or this war deck system that we have has bounty hunters and has this and has that. And then the person that doesn't know anything about EVE Online who's like, wow, that game's amazing, you can actually see corporations go to war. And I think that's a driver of interest for people that don't play the game. And that's the kind of stuff that I would want to.
I think you see then, like, you like to see those kind of things, but I think you.
Yeah, I do.
You
and
might
I,
think
I'm,
that you
I'm
might
trying to
be able to influence CCP too much on that kind of things. Because what I noticed and heard from multiple CSMs on multiple places is that you get the chance to tell what is a problem. You tell them why there is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You can maybe even suggest like a direction you might go. But then in the end, it's CCP devs that come with a solution how to fix it. And then you might have some influence, like get some nuances there. But in the end, it's not you who design the game or who designs the solution on that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what you're seeing now. That I get a feeling with you is that you think, I don't think the vortex mechanics are that great. It could be more imaginative, etc. That's nice, but I think that's not a role the CSM has. The role the
Well,
CSM
what the heck
has,
is the role if it's not that? Are you just
the role
are
the
they
CSM
just are they just junior developers to say, yeah, the
No.
statistics don't match? Like,
no,
because
they
you can
are
hire more
there to
developers. Like,
Yeah, but they can hire also people, game designers, because that's what you're basically suggesting you're doing. Are you then a junior game designer? Basically,
no,
what the
that's not what I'm
CSM is there
suggesting.
is
I'm
to
suggesting an advocacy, right? Which is what we're supposed to do. If we're an advocacy group, so when they say these are the changes that we have in mind, we're going to do this, that, and the other, then you advocate for saying like, well, you need to like consider that. There are other parts of the game that don't really interact with the way that you're planning it. It's an advocacy group. So that all the stuff that I'm talking about is just to show you these are the kinds of things that when CCP asks about anything, whether it's the smallest thing or the largest thing, that's the perspective that I'm going to be honoring. In addition to being the community person that I already am, I don't want to be a complete conduit from everybody's idea, like fix this, fix that. I don't want that. That's tiring and I can't do it. I just can't do it. So I'm not going to be what is traditionally a community person. But I think that everybody that talks to me knows that I talk to them directly, one-on-one, for as long as they need to talk to me about whatever it is they talk about. I answer all questions from all people, all the time, all day long, 7 days a week, and now for years.
So that's all nice and kind, but you want to relay the message to what is there and what is the big problems in Eve, and then maybe give an idea of a suggestion which way they can work in. But in the end, CCP is going to make their mind up with the solution that's there. There wasn't, like, we can see it with what happened with Aegisoft, Fuzzysoft, however you want to call it. There was the suggestion from all nullsec leaders at that point. They wanted occupancy-based soft. And then CCP made an occupancy-based soft.
It was all leaders of PvP. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But it might not have been the way you thought occupancy-based soft would have liked, with hacking links and all those kind of things, and that, etc. And that's not like the solution you would have taken, but they have gotten with what the suggestion was from most or all nullsec leaders that are there, what they should work towards about what the game wanted to happen there, and they based on that, and they made their own solution on how to do that.
Well,
and
that was
you see
not
all the
everybody.
time.
No, let me back you up, because that was not what everybody said. That's what was signed by nullsec leaders of multiple coalitions, and that was published, I guess, on the Matani.com, and it was a list of, hey, we're all signing this because we want, SOV to be these 3 things, and they got 2 out of the 3 or something like that. One of them was occupancy, like you got to live in your space to like love it. And if that's what they wanted and that's what CCP did, then everything's fine in nullsec. Like, the system works, because everybody's not everybody, but a lot of people complain about FuzzySov. Is it because they didn't get their full agenda, or is it because FuzzySov isn't what?
People don't know what they want.
They don't know what they want. They don't.
There's always and forever been a mythology of that letter that it was super vague. It had some high level points to it. It didn't have any detail to it really at all. It was, so it had nothing to do with sovereignty system should be like this, point A, B, C, D, E. It was basically, the occupancy stuff and things along that lines. And then when FuzzySov came out, it was like, well, that's not what we meant.
Yeah, totally. Like, whoops. Yeah, and that I think that's true. People don't always know what they want. They just want to be surprised, they want to be thrilled, and they want to have a good time. They want to discover things, and they want their reward systems in their brain to be triggered as often as possible. And Eve has a lot of things to do that sort of thing. But when players start building the game for the devs, I feel like that game is on its way to dead. And that's happened in Star Wars Galaxy, where the players argued so much that the devs gave in, and then the tried to make it more exciting, and they ended up totally destroying what was a pretty good game for people who wanted to have like imaginary gameplay space. And that was a sad thing. So I don't want to see EVE go in that direction where we become just a place where everybody piles into 4 sides and they have it all figured out and they basically do what's happening now and then is run over each other. This is not a good development for the future of EVE Online. It's not good to report these kind of wars, and it's not good to be a part of them either.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with you there, and I think that there is probably a better balance in terms of CCP listening to feedback and being overly responsive to it, in a reactionary kind of way. But I'm not sure that that's what it is necessarily. I think there are some things out there that are definitely you might definitely look at in that regard. But generally speaking, I think CCP does continue to have their own point of view on where they want to take things, and that the CSM, we hope that the CSM is there to basically go, look, if you do that, this is what is going to be the negative consequence of that. Are you aware of that?
Ash, I'm going to come right back to you, Ash. But let me add one more thing that I love. One of the best things you ever said, Dirk, to me was, yeah, EVE was broken back in 2008, but we played the hell out of that game. And I always go back to that. Like, the mechanics don't have to be perfect. It has to be the what springs from the mechanics. It's the does this capture your imagination? Is this exciting? Is this dramatic? That's the stuff that really works. I mean,
just the idea of like saying it's always been broken in one way or another, but there was a reason why at that time. And even now, there's a reason why people go and do what they do, even knowing that, maybe it could be better, or maybe if you try to make it better, it actually gets worse in some way. We play it, in the way that we do because we battle through those deficiencies as any player or group might see them.
Right. And one last thing on this. It's not that the North is getting run over by Imperium, which they clearly are. Even despite Sunday's show that had 1 victory in SH1, it looks like they're getting run over pretty good. Despite that, it was the same thing I was complaining about when I was saying that the Imperium going down in the North to the Money Badger Coalition was a terrible war. And I never supported it and never thought it was good and didn't enjoy it. But I was in the major fights there, and I'm in the major fights now on these. And it just wasn't very exciting. And, it seemed like it was just not, despite how much everybody wanted to talk about it and report on it, there wasn't anything really good to report on. And I remember even then, Sapporo Jones from Test was like, damn it, why isn't TMC writing about this? I mean, he's practically screaming on a podcast that we weren't getting the story. We weren't telling the stories of the big war. And my answer to that is, what's to report? It's already a foregone conclusion. There's no interest in this. Like, that's not, I don't want to write about it. And I know other people don't want to write about it because nobody's writing about it. It's not that we're not asking people to write about it. So the point is, this isn't compelling gameplay. It's not very imaginative, and it certainly isn't attracting new players to EVE Online. So it's not about the mechanics. The mechanics are the soil. It's about the plant that grows out of the soil. That's what you need to look at and say, how can we actually tune that right, even if the mechanics aren't tuned perfectly? Ash wanted to say something. Sorry.
Sure. So a good example of a company that's known for doing testing and receiving feedback very well is Gearbox. And there's this story about how when they were testing Borderlands, one of the feedbacks that they got was that it was too much space in between the different combat zones, right? So, you've got different points of interest, and then you have to travel between them. And the complaint was that was too big of a travel, that they should shorten up the levels so that way they can just get to the action. And what Gearbox did was they just added more enemies into the travel sections, which effectively turns the travel sections into a different kind of combat section. So the practical lesson there is that it's useful to listen to what the concerns are of the players, but it's often like the job of the game designers to look at the concern behind the feedback, right? So if the problem is that the transportation sections is too boring, then the answer would be to actually make them interesting and make them engaging. So in a lot of ways, like we can state our problems. We can say what we think is, or what is making us feel bad. Because, the fact that we don't like X experience, that's valid. But our ideas about how to fix them are often short-sighted. And so a good game developer will look at that feedback and figure out maybe alternative ways of perhaps getting to the same point.
And that's what I will. Then you make it more my point clear than I could, then etc. And that's why I'm saying you can say, yeah, I don't like that, etc. But it's in the end, CCP is going to tell what's going to happen. And now we have to do the work tech mechanics are made. They're not even that big in use yet. People have to get used to them. Let's see in half year and year further how things work, and then we can give our opinions about it and see if it works, yes or no. And in between, you follow up on what kind of if there are big issues that make it broken, yes or no. And I think that is, and we might not always like the solution CCP comes, but it's their solution they have to make. They know better the background with the game, and it's our job as players and CSM more than that to recognize what the problems are in the game and to make sure CCP knows of them. And that's why I think it's also very important that the CSM among themselves, and that's what I have the feeling they have done all the time, and is recognize the biggest issues that are in the game now that people have, and present those to CCP to they know what they should work on and what has the highest priority. And it's something that to get things done, if every CSM has their own 3 problems, then like there are 30 problems they should work on.
Well,
That's not
no,
going to work.
That's not how it
And
works. That's not how it works, and that's not how I would be a part of it. It's not. It's what I'm worried about when I said that. If I worry about it at all, and I'm not worried about it, right? If you work as a group, you come together as a group. You're all professionals. You're all professional people, and you're all professional players. Then it's fine. It's going to work out as a group. You want to come to a consensus. That's fine. What I worry about is that it's part of an agenda. I worry about it's part of an agenda that's tribal, because these are all tribal players. But more than that, I worry that it's going to drown out parts of the game that don't have representation, because they're not geared to be represented in this system. This system is geared to represent large organizations. It's not geared to represent small organizations.
How many people in this CSM are high-sec players that work with Vortex?
Well, that doesn't matter, because they use logistics that go through war deck territory, so they're well aware of that. It's not like they actually said, okay, I think this was not just this last 2 years. I think war decks have been people have been talking about them for about 4 or 5 or 6 years about how broken they are. So I wouldn't give this CSM credit for putting it on there. I think. Well, do you think it was?
I mean, I give them credit for I think, okay, and again, this is coming from from the limited feedback that you do get from the CSM about something that they were kind of pounding their fist on the table that needs to be looked at. I'm not saying that other past CSMs haven't brought it up, but I think that this one may have brought it up more.
Well, I give them credit for it, whether CCP did it on their own or CSM pushed them to do it. It was CCP finally looked at the statistics, and I think that's what they reacted to when they saw the statistics, which is what I expect from CCP. CCP listens to the CSM, but then they do their own investigations or whatever, and that seems to work out when they find there's there's evidence to support what CSM is saying. I don't expect that the CSM goes in there and tells CCP this needs to be looked at, and they look at it and they do something about it. There has to be like some kind of evidentiary based acknowledgement that this is a problem. What is crazy to me is that CCP didn't know that, because it had been in the minds of people who watched this game for a long time. So how could they not know that the statistics were bearing that out? That was shocking to me, and I said it at the time.
Maybe deep down, but it just wasn't something that they were ready to put on their agenda, because they've been working on this nullsec revamp for the last 4 years.
And if CSM didn't came together, but everybody had their own small points what they think that was important. And not everybody was Vortex as one of the highest point, but if they worked all together, they all agreed that, oh yeah, Vortex need to be done. So they put it on their top agenda and get Vortex done. That's what came out of there, and that's why it got that high. I'm suggesting, and that's just how they work together and get things on there. But if everybody had like a top 3, and on Vortex was as number 4, then then that wouldn't have been there. So I think it's very important for CSMs to work together and get like the big things there. And then when you have specific panels that work towards on specific parts, then everybody can give their own opinion and give their own talks, etc. But what he said, the first talk they have is with the upper leadership of CCP, and during that talk they give what they feel are the biggest issues in the game and where should be worked towards. And I think that's a good idea. And then you don't say that you cannot talk about all the other things there and all the sessions that they can bring up those problems and ideas, and all the time you talk behind the scenes with the weekly meetings, etc., etc. If they're still there, you can bring up all those kind of things there. But CSM needs to have a united front on the biggest issues each year to get those things being worked at and get those things done. And that's what I see as the biggest issue there. And
okay, well, let me just if we're talking about my candidacy, and me not being part of a group, let me just put you at rest that that's not going to happen, because I've worked with groups before. I just told you what my concerns were about that, but I don't think that they should the CCP, the CSM should be restricted to that sort of a thing. And that's all I was trying to express there. I don't know if that's what you meant, Dirk, when you asked that question or brought that up.
Well, again, I think your answer was kind of taken in the wrong way, or at least came out in a way that allowed people to do that. When I know that in talking to you as much as I do, you're such a massive collaborator, and I don't mean that like in the no collusion kind of way, but like. Way. like you just collaborate with people all the time. But I recognize that basically what you're saying is, but I don't want to just collaborate on something that I wouldn't necessarily agree with if what I think is there is a blind spot to it. That if you have 9 null set guys on there, not that it's tribal. See, I don't even believe that it's a tribal thing. I believe that there's a blind spot to what major issues are in the game, simply because their focus is so heavily on their areas, right? There's just a natural tendency, even though I think a lot of these guys are incredibly smart in multifaceted ways across EVE, there's always going to be a blind spot.
That's exactly what I'm saying, and that's really my feelings about it too. And I think, and actually thanks, because I didn't think about this, but collaborative group work is what I built at EN24, and that made them actually do really well. They became darlings of CCP again. They actually beat TMC in ratings, and then I went over to INN. And then I brought in a lot of collaborative work there as well. And it got even more collaborative near the end of the 2 years that I spent there. And then Talking in Stations has been nothing but a giant collaboration with a team. And it's just, to say that I'm not somebody that's a group player, that I want to be on my own and talk about my own issues, that has to be completely looked at by looking at what I've done for the last 4 years in this game and the groups that I've built in this game that serve the game. It doesn't serve me, and I haven't used the station as a weapon to get elected either. So this isn't for me, but it's something that I've done with people to build it for other people. And that is what I've done, again, for 4 years, that if I'm on CSM or not, if I were on CSM, that's what it would be. That's kind of a model of what I would do. Of course, I can work with a group, and I can work with anybody. I more than anybody in this game can work across lines of tribalism if they exist in CSM, which I hope they don't. But I'm just saying.
Okay. That I'm sorry to say that during that interview you had 2 points that you didn't make clear enough during that interview. The part about and how you want to work together with CSM, and the part about golden ammo, what you had to explain later, and I didn't want to bring that up. But if you're saying like, yeah, I wasn't clear about that, or I think that's really bumped you, and I'm sorry to say that. That's just about it.
It bothers me because, and I should be more sensitive actually. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to over yell or over talk you, but I wanted to cut you off because we've been going a long time about that, and I just wanted to say, we'll nip it in the bud. Let's deal with that, so that it can be just completely done. If I didn't express it very well, I find that the Jin Tan is a talented guy, and he put together questions that were very realistic for the confines of his experience at CSM. In other words, he was putting together questions that were very relevant in his experience at CSM. And if you say, okay, well, if that's, and I was at a point where I'm like, I'll talk to anybody about anything. So anybody wants to interview me, even one-on-one, I will talk to you about EVE. I'm like Grath in that way. I'll talk to anybody about EVE Online. So to do that interview was fine. One is I wasn't practiced, and it didn't really work. The questions didn't really work for the type of person that I am. They're hyper specific about the way that they work CSM. So I don't necessarily even agree that that's the way CSM should work, right? That's how it worked the last 2 years. That's not necessarily the way it worked before that. But he's coming from his experience, so what can I say? So I thought the questions were hyper constrained and already had baked in answers, right? And I knew those answers. I could have answered those answers. I could have given you the typical, yeah, sure, I'll work with a group. I like everybody. Look, I cross party lines all the time. I talk to the leaders of everybody, every coalition in this game all the time, and I'm friendly with them, and I keep their information secret, and I keep their their comments secret. So yeah, I know how to work in a group. And sure, monetization is a dirty word in EVE Online. And I'm thinking, yeah, sure it is. Yeah, and I would never go for gold ammo, and that's true actually. But it was like, yeah, I know all those pat answers. And to differentiate myself and to show you that I think more about the game than just the typical answers you're going to get from every other CSM, I'm going to give you the complicated answer. And that's what I was trying to do. So it didn't come across very well, but if you listen to both interviews from me, and if you're listening to this now, and if you've listened to the shows over the years, I think you understand that I understand the game, I understand the players of the game, I understand the cross-section of the players of the game. I've given lectures at eVegas for 2 years in a row, and 3 years of the last 4, about high-level activities in the game, what wars happened, summarized 5 years, yeah, I've been looking at this game a long time. I've been playing it a lot longer. So I know this stuff.
Antheron, we don't need you to try and pretend to be smart by giving a complex answer. We just need a right answer.
That's what I'm not going to give you. I'm not going to give you the first straight right answer, because that's just, it's almost too easy. And it's and I don't think it gives EVE enough credit. The Pat 1 answer doesn't give EVE enough credit.
No, it doesn't. But again, sometimes you can get to 80,000 feet, and there's not necessarily an answer built into that. And I will say this: I also think that you take a little bit away from some of the current and prior CSM. We don't know how deep they get. I know some of them can get super deep, and I have to expect that while they're sitting there having conversations with CCP, whether it be at the table or whether it be, in whatever method they're doing it with, or whether it be, when they're meeting with them at player events or what have you, that they're having some of those more kind of philosophical conversations about things. In many ways, the same types of philosophical conversations that players of all stripes have when they, get a chance to, talk to one of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and this is kind of one of the problems with the minutes, right? The minutes don't adequately reflect sort of the larger thoughts that are coming out of CSM members' mouths. The CSM members themselves are kind of incapable of getting out there and fleshing out what their thoughts were on things, because they do have NDA restrictions and therefore can't get into the hypotheticals that maybe they brought up and CCP shot down or whatever, right?
Right. Is that the right answer? Is that what?
Yeah. Well, yes. Saying I'm right that's the right answer.
Sure.
No. But I mean, again, I think that when you talk 80,000 feet, I think you're kind of laying out philosophically the types of things you think about as opposed to a platform. And nobody should have a platform. This is not what I'm bringing to CCP kind of crap, right? Because that's not what they're there for. They're there for feedback.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to show. That's why I'm giving you more complex answers. You want the correct answers? I'll give you it. I do not support pay to win. I do not support gold ammo.
I do.
Done. You do, right?
I could make a case for it, but
you make a case.
I don't expect you to have the right answers, but you gave such an answer that gave so much interpretation and was so fake that you allowed other people to attack you on it, and that's and get you there, and then you get on your show angry and telling that Imperium and Aerith is trying to derail you, your campaign, and that's how
right?
you feel.
No,
it was not
guess
them.
what?
It
He
was
actually
not
got
them.
people talking though.
Like Aerith said during Meta Show that he likes you, that he etc. But that and Mittens couldn't believe what you said, and like there were other people who brought it up.
No, but they
during
ran with it
chat
for a
and all
good
those kind
long
of things.
time, even though they didn't
Of course,
know. Yeah.
and you gave him those chants.
Yes. Okay. I get your point. I left it open.
And the same you did with your first answer about how working together with the CSM to work towards points and etc. And if you said no, if we work together and we can agree with each other on a thing, then you premised the thing you wanted to there. You want to agree with each other to points. Then my points would have been this, this, and this. That's a much better answer than I don't really want. Basically, what I took from it, I don't really want to work together on getting central points there because that I don't see the CSM need to be working that way, and we need to bring all points need to bring brought across, and that's just how I took, and I have the feeling a lot of people took that interview you that, and because you left those kind of things open for interpretation, you get attacked on that. You get people asking you questions about that, and now we're talking about it. And
well, you're talking
but talking about it during the talking stations, it got brought up. You got frustrated about it. You get now a bit frustrated about it.
I got frustrated.
I bring it up
about
but that's at least. And the derail is not something they did with purpose, or even if they had the intention to derail you. If you saw what the responses were, they were like very surprised. Yeah, that cannot be true, or etc. And like if it's they had an all reaction. It was not their goal to derail you during that. It was not even, I think, something they brought up themselves. They read something about it in chat, as far as I can remember, right? So it's like it got brought up and they responded to it. And of course, if you give them such a topic, then they're going to go with it because that's something that is there.
That would be true, except that Aerith and I talk, and we he'd made fun of me in private, and I joked with him back, and we'd had a conversation, and I cleared it up for him. But then he still brought it up on, in front of his audience. So at that point they were clear on it. It wasn't like, oh, there's a surprising thing. But I understand you're saying it was just a thing that was out there, and they brought it up, and then they laughed at it and went on for, I don't know, a good 15 minutes about it.
And then
Matterall, you're a politician, buddy.
I'm not a politician.
No, you are in a sense of CSM, okay? Because look, you're in a land where my friend over there means that other guy that I hate, or that I want to defeat, or that I want to undermine. Even if they say, hey, we're friendsies in that case.
Well, but I'm not political in that sense. Like I'm not a political player. I've never
Then you should have honestly run for CSM.
Player. It's a matter of being a candidate for CSM.
Listen, I'm not a political player or tribal in the game. I'm an advocate for EVE Online to all players. In fact, I want more representation for players that don't get represented by all the guys that are already in CSM. And it's as simple as that.
So the thing is, that doesn't change that you're a threat for vote count. So that's what other people come at it from, and that's why they may come at you and attack your candidacy in one way or another.
Exactly.
It's not a matter of being apolitical or anything like that. It's a matter of you might not be the status quo of what they want.
And that's a bad thing, how?
Exactly.
It keeps Matterall's, name in the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can find that wedge and drive it in, by they I mean anybody that sees you as any kind of threat on this, they can find that wedge and drive it in, they're going to do it.
And you let them do it.
Well,
yeah, you kind of help them.
What? Based on the way he phrased it in that interview? I mean, a lot of these people are not really polished at doing interviews. Let's be totally freaking honest here. There are other ones that are
true,
quite. There are other ones that are quite good at it. And incumbents have a bit of a advantage by having been there. They sound more enlightened because they've like literally been at the table. Which there is something to be said about experience in in that way. Not like 20 years of experience or shit like whatever we're into now, but
it says that somebody's running scared to me though.
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. I mean, I think there's also partially. Look, there's just campaigning out there. There's and you can say it is campaigning or not. It's not campaigning. I mean, maybe there is something there. I don't know. I didn't even hear this whole thing on Sunday that you guys went through or whatever. But
it's just a note at the end saying like I don't know. It's kind of. I actually was wanting to talk about something else, which was the tribalism of the election and how it affects a player representation, a player representative group, and how those are incongruent, right? Like you really shouldn't be electing people based off their alliance allegiance. That doesn't seem like the right way to get player representation about the game and its development. Those two things shouldn't really belong.
It actually has two problems.
Yeah.
Not only are you not representing the players, but if the CSM gains a reputation of not representing the players, then it'll be easier for CCP to dismiss what the CSM is saying. So you're actually losing your power as a CSM by not showing that you are holistically looking at the problem.
Exactly. I think that's why they get sidelined a lot, because they realize they don't have good representation in CSM. I think I don't know if they've actually ever said that, but I think Fozzie came close to saying it in a tweet where he said, well, CSM is just one avenue. We look at other avenues. Yeah, he did say that.
And they do. I mean, they do. I believe that they are more responsive to feedback on the forums. I think you've got some that, read, some of the things on Reddit, that listen to shows, that, read, articles and things like that.
Yeah.
There are multiple avenues. Okay. The CSM just has a bit of a different angle to it because they can be talked to, with more information going back and forth, as opposed to just listening to kind of spitballing from the audience.
Yeah. Right. That's, it's fine. Whether I get into CSM or not, it's fine. Talking in Stations will still be here. We'll still be able to, at least report on what's going on in the news. What CSM will lose if I'm not elected is that they may lose that voice that is actually, I think, and it's weird because I have to try to separate myself from this. I'm not trying to be boastful or anything, but I think it's a compelling voice, and it's a voice of a lot of experience and a voice of deep concern for other parts of the game as a whole, not one team or another. And I think that's what CCP needs to look for in general from players, because you're going to get a lot of the same answers from the same people if you keep basically electing them in this way, where it's all baked in on who gets in there. The first 8 positions in this CSM are generally baked in depending on how people actually vote. And you know what's funny, Dirk? I've been thinking about this. It's kind of like how many armies does the Pope have? Something like that. You remember that? Like, how many legions does the Pope have? Well, who knows? He could have them all, or he could have none. It really just depends on how much loyalty the soldiers in every army have towards the church and how much they have towards their military leaders.
Well, yeah, and I do want to take you back to the idea of tribal voting. Okay, you can call it tribal voting, you can call it, party line voting and things like that. The folks that are in these coalitions, these alliances out there, okay, not all voters are smart voters. Some of them are just going to do what they're told because they don't want to think any more than they freaking have to. And that's why you have party line voting in various places in real life. Okay. We can call it the idiot vote, whatever you want to. Okay. But you also have people that they are ready, willing, and able to vote for these people that are put forth because they have experience being in an organization with these, with these folks, right? I can damn well bet that the people in test are going to vote for Villy, not because the test ballot is coming out and they're all idiots, okay, but because they actually believe Villy is a smart player at this game and, maybe should have a seat on the CSM. The same thing with a Dunk Dinkle, the same thing with an Aerith, with an Anominate, with a Merkle Chen, okay? Like, so it's not purely tribal. It's basically saying, look, these guys in our organization. Do you want to vote for them? We'd like you to vote for them. This is who we're putting up. They're not putting up idiots.
No, they're not. That has to be. Every time I complain about the system, you really have to always make the comment, these guys are really good. They're good at the game and they're smart. And I think nobody's putting up trash candidates. They're all good candidates for them. So it's hard to say that the system doesn't work because you have such quality candidates coming out of those alliances. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was, and this really reflects on how we look at EVE Online. We look at EVE Online in a almost an anthropological way, is how do systems come together and create tension, and how do representatives of those systems fight each other and that sort of stuff. We're not really looking at a person's individual story. So we only in very rare cases do we do it, but we don't look at, say, the apple pear's journey through EVE Online, because we don't really care about the apple pear journey, right? Apple pear does. But we're talking about how does somebody rise up through Imperium to become a fleet commander? What kind of a person does it take? What characteristics? And then it becomes very interesting because we're looking at the system, not the actual individuals of the system. And the parallel is Game of Thrones for the first, 7 seasons was about the same thing.
Okay.
No spoilers. No spoilers. You'll get
you
zapped.
Totally spoil that now.
You'll get zapped. This doesn't spoil anything. But the first seasons that really were compelling were about how everybody was in character doing what they would have normally done, but how the winds of events put them at odds with each other when you were cheering for both sides a lot of the time. And that's very interesting writing. That's very interesting storytelling. And then the last season of Game of Thrones was very much character driven. What are these characters thinking? How are they feeling? And that was a lot less compelling. So it's not about the CSM as individuals. They're all smart and capable. It's the system at work. How does it work? What kinds of tensions does it have on it? Does it really represent the player base beyond just the groups that are voting in massive organized blocks?
Well, we know that it doesn't adequately represent, all right, the breadth of the player base. Okay, what it represents is the breadth of the voter base who actually are willing to get involved in that level. Okay, and we know that organized voting and whatnot comes into play in that, and that there is a broad swath of player styles and all that kind of stuff out there that goes un or underrepresented because they can't organize in any way. Okay. And I know that at some point here, the questions that come up about, well, why can't they, we have, this segment represented and that segment. CCP is not going to put their elbow on the scale. They basically said, we're going to create this thing and you, the players, are going to vote on it. Okay. And what you send us is what you send us. They would be accused of putting their elbow on the scale if they basically said, well, 3 are going to come from here and 2 from over there and all this kind of stuff. Okay. And just given where the CSM originated from, I don't see them kind of, pulling that card.
Now, let me answer a few questions while we wind up because I got to get going. Who can vote in this election? Omega accounts can vote in this election. So if you have an Omega account, that's a paid for account, then you can vote. That's who's represented. Am I wrong about that? It's not the...
No.
Yeah.
Alphas can run.
Alphas can run, right.
There is no alpha suffrage. They're not full citizens.
Yeah. So Omega accounts need to run. So activate the accounts in order to vote. The voting system is a little complex, but basically just know this. You don't need to know how the system works. You just need to know this. Order matters. So put your favorite candidate at the top, the one that you really want to win, right? Not the one you think will win, but the one you really want to win, and then go down from there till 10. And at some point, your vote will count. It just may count not for your first or second vote, but maybe your third, maybe your fifth. It depends. But put them in the order that you want.
Well, no, I mean, it can theoretically expire with all 10 of your selections in ranked order, failing to do it by the end, right? But, what it allows you to basically do is you may like, candidate, C over here, right? But, candidate C doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of support, but whatever, you want to throw it there, you can do it. And then if that person gets eliminated, then it looks at the rest of your ranked order to now cast a vote towards somebody else in a later round.
Yeah. Well, the point for you as a voter, if you guys are listening, is to basically put them in the order that you want them to be in there. And, don't be strategic about it. Just put it in the order that you really want them to be on. It'll count in some way. By the way, is that the way Eurovision does it? Somebody's asking. We can't watch Eurovision over here in the U.S., so I don't
understand why people watch that in the first place. That is such an overrated TV show.
A lot of people, I remember Tiberius and Rivra and Caleb, they were all in, I think it was Targeting Stations or somewhere, or no, it might have been INN, and they were watching it live together, which is pretty funny, and I couldn't watch. I was all bummed out. Okay, Killaby, I know you were away for a while, but...
I ate.
Yeah. I never...
I tell you what...
Yeah.
Good.
I don't take it personally when you deafen your connection here. So I know you're doing something, but...
Yeah, I always just go away, like either I'm AFK for some reason, or just like just now, I was just eating. Basically.
Yeah. Well, were you gonna say, Dirk?
No, yeah. I just want to kind of ask the question because again, when you get back to this, player representation thing and high sec and low sec and wormholes and this kind of stuff, right? At the end of every election, when the bitching and moaning actually, really gets going of null sec domination and all this kind of stuff, right? When was the last time that you saw kind of one of the players or a group of them begin to form following the last election and work the next year to try and build a coalition of their own so that it wasn't 3 weeks before the next election before they're like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm a high sec candidate, or hey, by the way, I'm trying to fix faction warfare. It seems like they don't ever try and kind of do that because it takes some time. You can't just do this shit in 3 weeks or a month.
Yeah, I think I've seen that, though. I've seen Jintan slowly built up to his campaign. Commander A's, I think, did too, who's in here. And then I think
A's was the last one that I remember trying to work with some other people in HiSec a couple of years ago.
Right.
Yeah, that didn't get very far.
Apothny too kind of showed up, not at the last second, but they've been at it. The thing is, it's hard to distinguish yourself in EVE Online, and it's very difficult to do it in the game, right? That's why people like Killaby and Villy, and if Elo had run, he would have been one of these people that has distinguished themselves in the game. They're famous in the game, and not only are they famous, but they have power in the game. But very few people can do that. Very few people can do that. They almost need certain conditions and certain personality types together to be able to do that. You need the time and you need the cunning to do it. Most people who are older or whatever, they can't donate all that time, or they just can't donate all that energy because they have families, they have jobs, they have whatever else. So it's usually young people that can make that kind of a name for themselves for a time. And what you have then is less options to make a name for yourself in the game. So you have to go to media, you have to write articles, you have to put out position papers, You have to talk about what you think about in the game and hope that it resonates. And you want to see if you have kindred spirits out there that'll actually emotionally invest in you to vote you number one on their list. And that's what a lot of those guys did. But with Apothony and Jintan, they had the added advantage over Commander A's to be able to, both younger, I think, to go and be chat casters, or they were able to go up and talk about the Alliance tournament and be, big personalities on the Alliance tournament, which gave them a leg up, which is probably why they got elected and Commander A's didn't. But that's just an observation off the cuff. I don't know if that's actually what happened.
No, I mean, look, name recognition goes a long way out there. I mean, I think that, the mere fact that we're even having a conversation about, you're having run for CSM, was because you generated a level of name recognition in the way that you did it. Other people do it by being Alliance leadership types. Other people do it by being FCs that are out there and get their name out there, both to the people that they fly with, as well as broader, just by, being big time FCs and things. Others do it because of YouTube videos or however the heck they do it, right? Mm-hmm. Name recognition matters. Having your thoughts have been out there for a while where people get to know, you as a player and a thinker is extremely important.
Yeah.
And then, of course, some sort of, whether it be grassroots support or whether it be organized support, is just a must. But it's like we're literally talking about, real world elections and why they happen the way they do.
Yeah. And sometimes you get celebrities that are, that win office, and when really the people who have been doing the thing for years, doing policy, the policy wonks that are boring to listen to, those guys don't get in office. So we don't always elect the best people for the job. Elections are very emotional. They're very emotional. They're not that reasonable. And so really you have to this dance for the CSM, I'm finding out firsthand, other people know from their experience, is very much an exercise in not saying the unpopular thing, because it paints you in a corner. You can do nothing as a Matterall character, as a media character. You can do nothing but lose. I'm not going to ingratiate myself even more to people that don't already like me. So I'm starting with 100%, let's say, and all I'm going to do this campaign is lose people that are scrutinizing what I'm saying, of this or that, and that's really, or the people who've heard of me but don't really know what I stand for. Those people would get lost by stunts like what Aerith did, putting out false information on the meta show. That's going to hit a bunch of people who'll be like, "Oh, Matterall said what? Oh, I can't vote for him." I wouldn't.
You've got your own counter programming too.
But exactly. Yeah. But I have my own counter program, which.
I think maybe you should have been at more player events over the course of the last year, kissing more babies and telling people what they wanted to hear. But if you don't want to roll like a politician, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, Vegas, I did. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. I think player events are a good way to just kind of make personal connections. I make personal connections all the time with people now, after all these years of doing it, that have helped, but it's still, like I said, it's not, there's an emotional aspect to voting, but you don't know if people are going to vote for you at all. Even people who are sure things don't know if people are going to turn out and vote for them. But it's also like, even if people tell you, you don't even know if they're going to vote for you. You really just don't know. So at the very, very beginning, we'll bring it back to the very beginning of the show, when I said I was stressed, yeah, this is a stressful process. You want to win, or at least you want to show up well. And if you don't, it's kind of embarrassing, right? So
no, it shouldn't be. You're giving it your best shot, though.
No, but we have something at stake, right? I think that I have something at stake. I think there's a big risk here for me, because what were we saying, Dirk? It was like, if I have a terrible showing and nobody votes for me, they all like me, but nobody liked me enough to put me at the top of their list. So I get knocked out in the first few rounds. You have to reevaluate.
Yeah, but to me, it sounds like care way too much what people think about you, man.
Yeah.
Like,
no. But
like, who gives a shit if you run? First time I ran for the CSM, which was actually the year before last, I didn't have a great turnout on votes either, and I just don't care. Like, who cares how many people vote for you? People that watch your show are not gonna be like, huh, that's that guy that tried to run for CSM and then failed. I'm not gonna watch his show anymore.
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
people
right.
watch you for. Like, so maybe just stop. Like, who cares, dude?
No,
I mean, I'm gonna troll you pretty hard, but it's just like
that's right. I gotta protect.
it's just all fun and games.
Gotta protect myself from dirt. No, but we talked about it, right?
I can tell you after losing 5 times in a row, I don't give a shit what people think. Like,
exactly.
But it's not about.
Does it affect you for later runs? No.
It's not about
Does
losing.
it hurt? No.
It's not about losing. So let me reiterate that. It's not Killaby doesn't fit this, neither does Commander A's. It's a certain specific model. Xander would know. So would the other guy who was a media guy. But as media, right? Like if you land abysmally on this, you kind of look at it and reevaluate. Like, what am I doing? How am I? If I don't have fans, then why am I doing all this work? Because it takes a lot of work to put all this stuff on over and over and over again. Like you do have to look at it and say.
But the people that watch the talk, like, unless you make it like a self-centered talk show, like I don't know, the Jimmy Kimmel show or whatever,
right? Or it's about you.
The shows you do aren't about you, right? Like what you effectively do is news, and nobody's a fan. I mean, yes, obviously there were some iconic news figures in the past that like everybody knew, but at the end of the day, people that watch the news, they don't go there to watch the moderators moderate the news. Like they go there to watch, whatever happened. And if you want to have it, if you want to get fans by what you're doing, then you need to run something like Jimmy Kimmel show or Last Week Tonight or whatever it's called. You need to make it a lot more centered around you instead of inviting a big panel of people. Like people that turn into TIS, they, as you've described very accurately, I think there was the last TIS show where you said it. People watch TIS because you usually get very high quality guests on, people that not a lot of other shows have. A lot of podcasts have much lower profile people on them, and that's what people watch you for, because they can hear the voices of the people that make the things happen in this game.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily because they're a fan of you, right? Like if you want that, which is fine. Now it's not like I'm criticizing if you want that, but then you have to make a different show. Right now you're running more like a news thing instead of a show that's going to generate you anything.
Right.
And and you also cannot link how you personally resonate with viewers to whether or not they would or should vote for you for a particular seat, on the CSM, right? Like people may like somebody because they're a great entertainer, but wouldn't necessarily want them to be president of the United States. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, like crazy shit happens. But, like I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm saying that you can't link the two things because it doesn't change what they think about you as far as what it is you're known for doing.
Point taken. You guys totally convinced me. Especially Killaby there. That was you made a lot of sense. But Dirk, when you and I were talking, it was kind of like we all have to reevaluate. Remember, like what were we talking about? Do you know what I'm talking about?
We've had this conversation a number of times, but I don't think it's a matter of you need to reevaluate. Well, I don't know. Some of the things I was talking about reevaluating had to do with TIS itself, if you do get on and things along those lines. But I think part of it was talking you down off of the don't link these things together, because one of the things you have to remember is your viewer base out there. Okay, the viewer base that watches TIS in whatever form, okay, and relates it to you. These folks are all coming from all over the place, okay, but a whole lot of nullsec types and things like that out there, who may sit there and go, I like Matterall and I could see him having a seat on the CSM, but I got this person that I support, over here and over here, and just around, right? So like you just can't link it together, and you can't get yourself, kind of like, oh geez, I might need to rethink. Like, you don't need to rethink shit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, but I thought that's what we talked about. That's why I brought it up. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought it up. I think
then maybe you took it wrong.
I must have taken it wrong. But I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense at the time, which was, it takes, and this is apart from the CSM run specifically, but it takes a lot of work. Only the people who do the work know the work. but it takes a lot of work to put all this stuff together. There's a lot of technical hurdles to overcome, and there's been a lot of learning along the way. That's why the show goes on the way it does. McLeod, thanks for that. Thanks, Derek. So there's definitely a lot of that goes on back here, and you really only have statistics to look at to say, are we resonating with people? Do people get a lot out of our show? And is this good enough to keep it going? And it's definitely like anything else, like an alliance in the game. It's all about momentum and key people in key positions, keeping it going. That's how it survives. And, I don't want TAS to fail Cascade because for whatever reason, you want to keep having good people kind of do that. But then you go and you do this popular election, right? And then you realize like, wow, you got skunked. Nobody voted for you. They like you. They think you're fine, but nobody put you on there because they don't have the confidence. And so then you have these self-doubts of like, why am I doing this why am I doing this? I'm not going any further with it. That's just the kind of thinking that goes on when you're like putting on a show that has to reach people, and then ask those people, is this the kind of representation you want in your game, to have them say no. And it would be contradictory somewhat, but I can see how they would be separate too.
But Matterall, most of us see it like a split personality right now. You've got Matterall, the candidate, and then you've got Matterall over at Talking Stations. There's a difference. So
good. All right.
No,
that's great to know.
separated.
That is great to know. All right. Gosh, I got to wrap it up because I have to go do the real job, which is not FCing. Don't have the luxury.
I wish I would, dude. I wish I would.
You wish you weren't, or wish you would?
I wish I would. I wish somebody would pay me a living for just running fleets in Eve. I would do it. If it was something like it would have to be more than an average living, because obviously it's something that's probably not going to be permanent. Mm-hmm. So I would have to earn enough money doing it that I could, after it's done, have enough time to get a real job or some shit like that.
I'll tell you what, that would be something that would recruit a lot of people to EVE Online. FCs get paid a living as esports.
It happened in the past. Some Russian alliances did it, but it's obviously a bit sketchy.
I think the Chinese pay their FCs, and on Tranquility they did. That's what I heard.
I'm actually really happy with my real life job now, so it's fine. Yeah. I was at this weird state of not knowing what to do with my real life, like the last 1.5 years, 2 years probably. Mm-hmm. But now I'm out of that finally, so it's good.
Well, yeah, okay. So you're actually in a good place then when you're in your transition.
I would say I'm not there just yet, but in like 2 or 3 years from now, I'm on a very, very solid way right now. 2 or 3 years from now, I'm going to be in a very good place, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Oh, that's
basically excellent. I finally found a company in real life that I can really identify with and that I really enjoy working for. So I think that and they're very interested in me. They're pushing me through a lot of stuff at the moment. So I think it's a very good path that I'm going right now.
Has your FCing and leadership contributed to your?
I can talk very well, and I'm not afraid of talking in front of people, which has led me to leave some very good impressions at I was at some career branches lately, and we did like little presentations there, and obviously I'm not scared of talking in front of people at all, so that worked out really well.
Yeah, when you're in FC, you have to.
It's different from talking through Bumble or having people sitting in front of you still. Like there's still a difference, but I would say that I gain a lot of confidence. Just I know that I can talk, and then I can focus a lot more on what kind of impression I give off, to the people sitting in front of me, rather than having to also think about how I talk and what I say. Like I'm a pretty good talker, basically.
Yeah,
a lot better in German than in English. Although I think my English is fine too, but
it's fine.
It's a much better in German.
And that's really surprising because you're a young man, and so to have all that experience already, talking in front of a large group of sometimes strangers, and commanding them, because let's face it, you're actually commanding them and motivating them, but also correcting them, and that balance is. I don't know if you get a lot of chances to do that in real life.
I'm a bit less oppressive, and like I'm pretty absolute in the way I run fleets. I just, I tell people what to do, and then they have to do that. Otherwise, I get mad. In real life, when I, like, for example, at this little thing we were at, we were split up into groups of 5, and we had to divide tasks on a certain project. And naturally, like without even thinking about it, I just started going like, okay, I think you should do this, and then I will do this, and he will do that. But instead of just saying you do, like I didn't say like you are gonna do that, I'm gonna do. I gave them, obviously I'm gonna listen to people that say, oh, I think I might be better at this thing. So instead of just saying no, you do it my way. It's what I do in my fleets, right? I am also kind of open to other opinions in real life because obviously I'm not a fucking. It's just not even something you do in real life. It's a bit different in EVE, I think.
Can't say everybody primary this guy over here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll wrap up. Dirk, thanks for coming on and having some coffee with me this morning.
Told you, man, you needed a box of white wine. You needed to get a good cry out. We had too many people though.
Yeah, a lot of things have been going through my mind on this CSM campaign. It's not like I'm thinking about it all the time, but it's certainly there. And it's, again, going back to the beginning, what's so stressful about it? The stress is you don't really know. Like, on the one hand, if I knew that I was going to lose, I could kind of I could be at peace with that. I could let that go. On the other hand, there's a possibility of winning. There always is, because if the TIS fan base comes out, that's bigger than any block, actually, because we have, the people that we reach, I wouldn't call them fans, but the people we reach can range from 3,500 to 7,000 people per episode that we put out. That's a lot of players or people who, but they may not be players, so who knows what they are. But if they decided to vote, if they all decided to vote one way and that way was for Matterall, then it would be a tidal wave. So it can be a tidal wave, but it can also be a fizzle and nothing because everybody voted for their alliance leadership, their tribal votes. And if that's the case, then it's a big zero. And if it's or if it's a tidal wave, it's a huge victory, not just for me, but also for it's not just about PvP and that. It's about other things too, and get that voice in there along with PvP. It would be a big message to send. So why am I nervous? Because I don't know what that message is. It depends on you guys and how much we actually, or how much you really want that to happen. It's a big mystery. So it's an unusual stress. It's like not knowing something and you have to just kind of wait.
Here's my take on it. If I get more than 3 votes, that means I'm coming back next year to try again.
What if you get less than 3?
I have 3 accounts in my own household, so I'm getting 3.
So if you get 1 vote from a stranger. Okay.
No, my 3.
Oh.
Anything more than that means I'm going to be coming back next year and running.
Okay. All right. Well, we were going to wrap up, but before we all take off, I want to do a thing, and this is something that we want to do every once in a while, is to raid. Let's see if actually this works. And raiding is just a way of dumping you off to other content so that you guys, if you want to hang out, you can still do it. So I want to thank everybody for showing up. Really appreciate it. We will see you next time this Thursday. And so I think the raid is going over now. If I'm correct in my thinking.
You are. You went through to Torvald.
All right, good. So you'll dump some people on him. Okay, so I'll stop this stream.